Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ciara Heaven, and welcome to Cork University Business School's International Women's Day event entitled Embracing Equity for a Sustainable Society. You're very welcome this afternoon, and we're delighted to welcome a fantastic panel of guests who have given their time and their expertise to join us at Cork University Business School UCC today. If you don't know me already, I am a professor at the Department of Business Information Systems at Cork University Business School, and I'm co-chair together with my colleague Dr. Jane Burke, Senior Lecturer in Economics, of the Cork University Business School Athena Swan Self-Assessment Team. So together with Jane and 30 colleagues, we're currently working on an Athena Swan Bronze application. What does that mean? It means that the business school, the College of Business and Law, University College Cork, we're committed to supporting academics, researchers, professional staff, and students in terms of developing and supporting impactful and sustainable equality work as part of everything we do at our university. And as part of those activities, we're welcoming you to join us today. So without further ado, I want to just maybe make an announcement, which is part of our Athena Swan activities. We're delighted to launch 2 scholarships targeting professional staff in our school, supporting them to undertake the Women in Leadership programme offered by the IMI in collaboration with 30% Club Ireland. So this is a fantastic initiative, and it's very timely given our talk today, but also, I suppose, what's happening in the world around us. It's an auspicious day, a day that we welcome announcement by government on a referendum targeting very, very important gender equality issues in our society. So without further ado, I want to start today's events by welcoming the opportunity to collaborate with 2 Cork University Business School students, Leah O'Brien and Anya McCormack, who've joined us here from first year BSc Finance, and they're going to work with our panelists over the duration of the next 55 minutes. We really hope you enjoyed this event, and we look forward to hearing from you as part of our Q&A session towards the end of this hour. So thank you, and Anya and Leah, I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, Ciara, for your introduction. Now we're going to briefly introduce our upcoming society, Women in Business and Leadership. We are in the end stage process of establishing a new Women in Business and Leadership Society in UCC, and the aim of this society is to help empower female leaders and to encourage more women to take up leadership positions. And we also want to encourage more women to pursue careers in business areas where women are in a minority, such as venture capital, for example, where only 4.9% of partners are women. We hope to organise events to encourage women across various disciplines to pursue careers in leadership.
Thanks, Anya. I'm delighted to welcome our 4 panellists today who have generously given their time to join us. I'm going to hand you over now to our panellists, Rebecca Donnellan, Mary Favier, Kate Hyde and Anne Sloane, who will give us a brief introduction about themselves. We will start with you, Rebecca, if that's okay.
Hi everyone, absolutely delighted to be here, and such an honour to be a part of this conversation and to sit on a very esteemed group of panellists, so thank you so much. My name is Rebecca Donnellan. I'm a consulting managing director in Accenture Ireland. I work predominantly in the utilities industry, and I kind of mainly do all work related to people and transformation when it comes to tech. I am a graduate of UCC. I did a BCom in 2011, and it was actually through my BCom that I did an internship in Accenture, which kind of started me off on my career path. And it has been a roller coaster journey. I think of most note was I spent 4 years working in the Middle East in the oil and gas sector. working across Saudi and Kuwait, and it has really colored who I am and the type of work that I do. Most recently, I'm a new mom. I am just returned to work, so juggling the beauty that is the work-life balance with a new baby at home. But it's bringing amazing challenges and new learnings, and just so excited to be here today and to have this conversation on such a celebratory day. So yeah, really excited to be a part of this.
Thank you, Rebecca. We will now go to Mary.
Hi, everybody. It's great to have this opportunity to speak to everybody. I'm a general practitioner here in Cork City in Favier Hill, and have been for over 25 years, and proud to be a graduate of UCC and of the Cork GP training scheme. So I've had a pretty varied career as a GP, sort of blending academic roles and working, as a practicing GP. So I've had academic teaching roles, writing educational materials for the Irish College of GPs, which is our academic institution. And then also I became a postgraduate tutor. I'm now a GP trainer in my own practice. So we're what's known as the deep end practice, which is an area of high socioeconomic deprivation. So I have a particular interest in that area. I've also had a long-standing interest in feminist politics and reproductive health in particular. I think the reproductive health area became because I was a doctor, and there are very few spokespeople for reproductive health justice in the medical area historically, and was the founder of Doctors for Choice in 2001. And that was at the time of one of the many referendum we had, which was trying to make suicide as an exclusionary clause so that you couldn't possibly access abortion if you were suicidal. And a group of us as doctors got together and said, the only voice you ever heard that was a medical voice, was a conservative voice, was a male voice, was a Catholic voice, and we knew that wasn't true. So hence Doctors for Choice started. But I was then instrumental in the repeal campaign, in Doctors Together for Yes, and then in the provision of the abortion service and working with Simon Harris to design and implement the legislation. During my journey, I became president of the Irish College of GPs and did that role for 3 years. And as part of that role, then sat on NEFIT for the 2 years of the COVID emergency, which was very interesting insight, bringing a perspective of general practice to it. I think, though, if you were to ask me of any defining characteristics of myself, is that very much around feminist issues, reproductive health issues, and the furtherment and mentoring of women. So it's really, I'm delighted to be here today. And the fact that it's one's own home institution is an added pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we'll go to Kate.
Hi guys, my name is Kate Hyde. I'm a graduate of UCC also. I studied BIS as well as a few other courses in UCC. I took the scenic route through UCC. I own a company called Glencove, which is a series of event websites here in Ireland and in the UK. I started the business in 2008. In 2009, I went on Dragon's Den and got investment from two of the dragons on that. Bought them out in 2015. The business continued to grow after that. Pre-COVID, we had 40,000 people on our events here in Ireland, the UK, and across Europe. I'm a member of the Ernst & Young European Winning Women Entrepreneurial Group, the Dwen Entrepreneurial Group. I also am involved in Ignite in UCC, and I've mentored for Leo for a few years now as well.
Thanks, Kate. Now we will go to Anne.
Thanks a million, Leah. Hi, everyone. And yeah, thanks. Similar to the other guests, I'm delighted to have been asked to attend today's event. So my name is Anne Sloane. I'm also a graduate of UCC. So I have a BA degree in economics and history, and then postgrad in computer science. So many moons ago. I am a member of the advisory board for BIS, which is obviously a key part of CUBS, and delighted to have been part of that for the last number of years, really acting as, you know, advisors to the BIS programs. In my day job, I work for Stryker, and I lead up the IT enterprise service delivery organization with Stryker. So I have a lot of background and experience in kind of many jobs and roles in IT. I've been with Stryker for about 20 years, which sounds like an awful long time, but it's kind of gone by in the blink of an eye, really gone by really, really, really quickly. I have worked with in both Ireland and the US. So that's kind of been an interesting experience for me as part of my work with Stryker. Really passionate about people development, about continuous improvement process, all of that stuff. Not as interesting as Mary's world as she went through that, but still, I love working with my current company. I think probably a lot of people know what Stryker is. We're kind of a global medtech company with significant presence in Ireland, globally obviously as well, but significant presence in Ireland, Cork, Limerick, Belfast, and in that very broad medical technology space.
Thank you, Anne. We are now going to move to our panel discussion, and we have a number of questions for our panelists. So I'm going to direct the first question to the whole panel, but I'll start with you, Rebecca, if that's okay. Why do you think it is important to celebrate International Women's Day in 2023?
Yeah, so I mean, first off to say, I suppose to me, right, I love celebrations. So I will be there for any celebration that anyone wants to take, big, small, life, work, I'm here for it. So first and foremost, so important. The second reason is obviously recognizing women, right? We are, I think if I pause for a second and reflect on where we're at, we released some research actually in Accenture this morning that found that 1 in 2 women are saying that they're either thinking about stepping back or leaving the workplace altogether. That 87% of them said that they are feeling extremely burnt out since the pandemic. So when you kind of pause and think about that, you realize that we have so much work to do. So we absolutely have to take days like today to pause, reflect on where we are, where we're going. And I know that there is a big debate about whether we should recall it, Gender Equality Day, or I think I hear a lot of men saying, why don't we celebrate International Men's Day? And we actually do, in fact, it is in November, and we do make equally of a big deal of that in our company as well. But we're not there. There's still issues. We're still a minority. And until that's sorted, we have every right to take a day to celebrate and recognize women and to really pause and think about the journey we need to go on, because it's changing, and it's changed over the COVID period. So yeah, I think so. Really important.
Thanks, Rebecca. Would any of the rest of our panelists like to share their thoughts on the importance of celebrating today?
I mean, I can go there. I suppose, we should celebrate women every day, right? To be honest, I think, and especially the countless women that have paved the way for all of us, right? And for me, I think it's really important to learn about and reflect on women who are pioneers across, a whole host of areas, science, technology, arts, politics, medicine, right? And particularly, I suppose, we think about kind of the women in our own families that have laid the foundation for us all to really kind of to be where we are today, to kind of gain the experiences and achievements that we have been able to do. I mean, there's been, many incredibly strong and inspiring women in my life, and in my family, particularly, I would say, women that did not have the same educational maybe and other opportunities, that I've had, but really their hard work and their resilience and kindness have really inspired me. But I think also we have to think about, it's what we kind of do and achieve as individuals, right? And, loads of opportunities for people today, and we can achieve an awful lot, but I think we also have to I think the expression is pay it forward, right? But we have to pave the way for others, you know, to do great things in the future. And I think that's, as women, I think we have to think about that. You know, how are we helping to empower and inspire others, whether it's, you know, mentorship or allyship or whatever. So just some thoughts.
Thanks, Anne.
For our next question, we would like to ask Mary, how do you think equity can be embraced in the healthcare sector in Ireland?
Oh, it's a big topic. Just referring to International Women's Day, I think it's really useful that, you know, that the theme for this year has moved from equality to equity, because I think that's fundamentally the difference. And I have a strong sentimental attachment to International Women's Day, as you can gather. I'm going to have some reservations as well, just because I think it is being corporatized. And I think it's becoming a little bit token, but I think gatherings like this are really useful because they actually dig in and they dig deep into the issues. And I think, you know, empower, you know, people, as Anne has just said, you know, to go on and to give forward. I think the issue of equity then in healthcare is such an important issue for women. It's an important issue for everybody, but it's a particularly important issue for women. I mean, one of the most things that was really, it was always striking to me in my work as a GP is, first of all, that 2/3 of all of our presentations in general practice are by women, because women are not only coming for themselves, but they're coming for their children and they're coming for their often elderly relatives. So there's a very significant care burden around health, and health is a really important and core issue to women. And it has very significant negative impacts if it isn't equitable, if in just how you get to university, because I have seen young people, particularly during COVID, and disproportionately young women who had significant difficulties during the COVID emergency with mental health, but also in caring issues, and then trying to access university. And so the issue of health and health equity is really important to women because they do carry a disproportionate care burden. I think fundamentally we need to acknowledge that health is inequitable internationally, but most particularly in our circumstances in Ireland. And it is most often around socioeconomic disadvantage. And there's a very steep gradient between those who are most privileged to those who are least advantaged in terms of absolutely all health outcomes. And of course, you all know them in terms of access to university and whether it's access to housing, but in health, it's a particularly pertinent issue. And so, for instance, the National Cancer Registry reported a couple of weeks ago, looking at statistics up to 2018, because they got somewhat paused with COVID. And the likelihood of having a significant cancer diagnosis has a very steep social class gradient, but while the gradient, the likelihood of you getting cancer runs at, those who in social class 5 are 5% more likely to get a life-threatening cancer. But in terms of the outcomes and 5-year survival, they're 48% less likely to be alive 5 years later if you're from a poor background. And so you can see access to healthcare and equity in terms of access to resources. So it's everything from you're more likely to be unable to get a general practitioner in an area of deprivation because they're hard places to work. You then, when you go, it tends to be very busy, appointments tend to be shorter, and then you have to sit on waiting lists to get into hospital, sometimes for many years. And then even when you're in hospital, your health literacy, your knowledge, your role of advocate, people who would advocate for you in terms of your health outcomes you're significantly disadvantaged. So in terms of equity in health, there's a lot of work to be done. First and foremost, it's actually about improving equality and equity across our broader community and socioeconomic disadvantage. And then it's in wider things like housing, the impact of housing. I've had so many patients in the last number of months, but particularly in the last few weeks, so anxious around housing. So there's obviously a whole section of anxiety in the higher social classes around ability to buy a house and the fact that young people are having a huge difficulty buying a house. But it's a little bit different to actually being afraid of losing your home and the significant stressors that brings in terms of anxiety, sleeplessness, more likely to smoke, more likely to drink alcohol, more likely to eat fast food, less likely to take exercise. All of those health inequalities and inequities really have a disproportionate impact on women. And I think that sometimes that's the reasoning behind International Women's Day, that they're the things we need to really address. And of course, we have a baked-in inequality and inequity in our health service, because it's a two-tier system. You have private access to healthcare and you have public access to healthcare. And unfortunately, that divide is widening, because with effectively a dysfunctional healthcare system, our public system at the moment is effectively dysfunctional. People are being increasingly pushed into private healthcare, paying for it even when they can hardly afford it, and then accessing it more. So you until that is removed, and the basis of Sloane Care, for any of you who know about Sloane Care, which is a new attempt to reimagine the Irish healthcare service, the most important aspect of that is that it would be a one-tier universal access for all system. If you want to access private healthcare after that, that's your own business, but you pay for it at full cost, which nobody does at the moment, and you don't get tax deductions on it. And all of our publicly funded hospital systems are for public practice for all of the patients of the country. And I think if we achieve nothing else in the 10-year plan for Sloane Care, we would have done a really important task in terms of achieving greater equity. We also then need to look at other discriminations in society. So for an example, we have them on ethnicity and race around the traveller community, really substantial health gradients there. So for instance, infant mortality in our wider population is 3.9 children die per 1,000 live births in the first year of their life. It's 14 for a traveller family. So people complain that travellers go to the doctor all the time. Well, wouldn't you, if you were 4 times more likely to have your child die in the first year of life? So the systemic discrimination against travellers is endemic in Irish society. Traveller women are 5 times more likely to die by suicide than a settled person, and traveller men 7 times more likely to die by suicide. And only 5% of the traveller population is over the age of 65 versus 14% of the settled population. So you can see there's really entrenched, and that's just a little microcosm of inequality and inequity. So you can see there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm optimistic, but it's going to be about young people in particular voting with their feet, saying our healthcare system has to be different. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. And sorry, Anya, if I may, just in terms of Mary's use of the term, just to remind us all that the theme today is embracing equity. And Mary, I just wonder, could you just say, just make a comment or two about equality versus equity?
Okay, so equality is basically that everybody gets the same opportunity. So you offer opportunity, and the classic one, you see this diagram drawn where there's 3 people of 3 different heights, and there's a high fence where you can see, say, the races over the other side of the fence, and you give everybody the same height box. Well, the tall person gets further leverage up over the fence that they could see over already. The medium-sized person now just gets to tip over the top of the fence. But the small person actually still can't see through the fence and is trying to look through the slats. And that's a classic example where you give everybody the same opportunity, but you're not achieving equity. And in reality, the solution is to you move some of the boxes around and give the small person 2 boxes, because the tall person doesn't actually need a box, because they're seeing over the fence already. And so it's really important we look at equity. What actually is your access? And in healthcare, it's for instance, in equity of access is around people having medical cards who can't actually afford to go to the doctor, which is means tested. And in areas of deprivation in education, it's providing desk schools with smaller pupil teacher ratios, and so that improves equity. And it's an important distinction here, I think you well pointed out, as opposed to equality.
Thanks, Mary. That's incredibly insightful. For our next question, we'd like to ask Kate, what supports do you think are needed to create equity in the entrepreneurial world?
Thanks, Anya. So I think a bit like Mary's saying there, first of all, we have to accept that equality and equity are 2 very different things. And in the entrepreneurial world, there is equality in that men and women can both go for entrepreneurial opportunities, but the equity isn't the same. And the opportunities, they're not as easy for a lot of women to attain as they are for men, because of maybe gaps in social narratives, and also through, I suppose, roles and, you know, socialization of girls growing up. So I think the first thing to accept is, you know, the equity isn't there, and I'm not so sure in the context of this conversation either, are the supports there yet either to really turn this on its head. So I know, like, universities, enterprise boards, Enterprise Ireland are great, and they have so many programs for encouraging female entrepreneurism. But I think there's still a huge hole in terms of the supports that are actually needed for women to enter and succeed in entrepreneurism. And the first thing in that hole is literally around talking about money. So rather than saying what I think the supports should be, instead, for any women on this call who are aspiring entrepreneurs or feel like it's a path they want to go down, I would suggest, in the absence of supports to talk about money, go and find people to talk about money. There's a huge disparity still in the way women and men talk about money. So my brother and his friends, they'll go for a few pints, they'll have the chats about their salaries, they'll talk about the holiday home they're saving for and the few bob they'll put away from this and that. Women still don't do that. We don't have meaty financial conversations about making money in the way that's needed for female entrepreneurs to succeed. So, you know, guys will go to the rugby, they'll swap tips. There's a culture there where men tend to exchange financial information from quite a young age. So you might even hear a guy saying something like, the old man's buying a house down in West Cork, you know, blah, blah, blah. His dad is probably being very savvy financially and investing money he's made somewhere as a pension, so he'll have financial stability down his life. We still don't hear those conversations for women, where maybe a young woman is saying, my mum's putting away a few bob there for a holiday down in West Cork, so that woman has financial stability later in her life. So I think there's still a big gap around talking about money in Ireland. We're not always aware of it. I think even ourselves as women, you know, we're kind of raised in the thing where, you know, when you make your communion and your confirmation and someone asks you how much you got, your mother says, don't answer that, that's rude, because we're taught from a very young age that money is vulgar. Money is not to be aspired to. Money is not something a woman should openly talk about. But the reality is, and even tapping back into Mary's points there, is financial freedom is so important for women. There was a time in this country that women couldn't leave their husbands because they weren't able to work, legally able to work, and they didn't have the money to leave abusive relationships. Financial independence is so important for women, and we need to talk about money more in Ireland, and we need to have universities, enterprise boards, LEOs, instead of talking to women about maybe, you know, leadership or filling gaps in your teams, let's talk about money. What is your salary you're aspiring to? What are your friends' salaries? How are you saving for your future? How will you help the people around you when you're financially stable? There is a burden on women still, and it's there to help those around us. But if you're not financially stable, it's very hard to help people around you that aren't also. So I think that's a huge, if anyone again on this call is an aspiring entrepreneur and feels, you know, it's something they want to go into, start talking about money. The second thing then I think that's missing is an absence of messaging to women that are aspiring to be entrepreneurs around maybe, and this is very not, it's going to sound a little crazy, but to be selfish. And a lot of the messaging for aspiring female entrepreneurs right now, and I track this, you know, you'll see a promotion in the newspaper. Are you female? Are you entrepreneurial? Join this group because up we rise together. We all lean in together and we all rise up together. That might be true in so many other areas of society, but entrepreneurship is quite a solitary game. Entrepreneurs, by their very characteristics, are quite territorial, aggressive in business. It's not the same as, say, going to work for somebody. It's your whole life. And I think the notion, you don't see the same messaging to men, where it's like, you know, I mean, I have several male friends that are very successful entrepreneurs, and if I told them that they should all come together and help each other rise up, they'd all start roaring laughing. And it's not that it's not important to be there for each other, but the message to women is always, we must help each other. like, you know, that's all well and good, but if your friend's business is going down the Swanee and she wants to talk to you for 4 hours when you have a really important presentation to an investor the next day, they're the moments we need to encourage women to actually be a little bit selfish, to put their needs before their friends, their partners, often even their children. And I'm not talking about in a minding your children way. I have 2 kids myself. I'm talking about in a what is my path, and to attain my path, I need to be given a little bit of freedom to say, it's okay for me to be selfish. It's okay for me to go away for a few days if my mum, you know, needs a bit of help with something. And we didn't always see those role models growing up. You know, me personally, we had 1 car when my parents were growing up, and my dad always got it. My dad always got it. Like, he always had a work thing. He needed to get the car. I have to be very aware that I'm not at times letting things happen just because that was my narrative growing up. And so even again, going back into talking about money and being a little bit selfish about our own desires, because if you create wealth, you can help those around you, you can donate to charities, you can make a difference in other people's lives. And I think another hole in the conversation around equity in the entrepreneurial world for women is around framing what you want. So, you know, when you're in your 20s, it's all kind of the same. We're all going to college. We're all looking to our future. But at some point, it does change. And the reality is, for women, their career ambitions and aspirations can be massively impacted by having children. And you know what? In your 20s, it's a good idea to see how that's going to fit in your life. And again, I'm talking to women in this group who might be aspiring entrepreneurs. I'm not talking about people who are going to get a job or feel that they'll never work for someone else. But if you have this massive hankering that you want to start your own business, you want to be like, you know, create wealth for yourself, you know, to support you, your family, those around you, you have to start framing out what you want. And even small things like, who is your partner? You know, right now you might be going out with the nice guy from the Blackrock Road, your parents approve, his dad's a solicitor in Ronan Daly German, he'll probably be a partner in Ronan Daly German someday. What about if you start a business and you start turning over tens of millions of euros? Is this boy going to support you in being the main breadwinner in the house? Is he going to be comfortable that you're paying for purchasing your house, maybe for cash, because you've had such a great year? You have to look at the people around you as a woman and see, are they going to help you get to where you want to get, and not actually sort of be threatened, their masculinity threatened? Because it is, you know, something we don't talk about around women in business as well, is there's still a very pressurized message on men to sort of be the main breadwinners, to carry the load on their shoulders. And that must change too. We must even start talking to our little boys about how you don't have to be the main breadwinner in the house when you grow up. Maybe your wife will be, but we're still not there yet. And I think the whole inequity around the entrepreneurial world for women are these conversations, and they're quite specific to Ireland, some of them. If you go to I mean, I've been to the States, and they'll ask you outright what your revenue for the year is. I mean, my father wouldn't ask me that, you know, like, it's so different here in how we talk about money. You know, we'd often see like revenue printed in newspapers that guys are making or whatever. And I remember one time, there was my revenue was printed in a newspaper, and like, you know, you can't talk about your revenue in Ireland as a woman because lest someone might think you're showing off. And I remember a comment from my brother-in-law sort of saying, gosh, they shouldn't have printed that. Now, I had to give the journalist that information because I'd been invited to a conference in the States that you had to be turning over a certain number of million to get to the conference. So that's why that journalist got that information and she printed it. My brother-in-law was horrified that they print that information. And yet we will see, my God, sure, we know what all the boys are turning over. We talk about men and money all day long. And so I'm so passionate about financial independence for women. It is so important. Frame your life, look at what you want. These supports aren't here now. Hopefully they will be in the future. But in the meantime, you can start working on them yourself if you're an aspiring entrepreneur. And if anyone ever wants to talk to me about any of these topics or money or anything like that, please always drop me a line. Thanks, Anya.
Thanks, Kate. That's very interesting. Our next question is for Anne. Throughout your career, you've spent time in both Ireland and the US. So we were wondering, what do you think are the biggest differences in terms of embracing equity in both of those countries?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm enthralled by the two prior answers, so mine isn't the same at the same level, I think. But I suppose typically what I've seen is, I mean, just from a practical perspective, when I worked in the US, I think there was, you know, you were expected to, and this was a good few years ago, right? You were expected to be in the office, excuse me, every day. You know, you were like, I used to try and work from Ireland in the summer, and that was kind of frowned upon a little bit. I'm glad, and they were not things that that I, you know, I experienced in Ireland, right? So that kind of level of flexibility. COVID has obviously enabled a lot of, you know, better, you know, level playing field, work-life balance, all of that. I mean, it's probably caused some issues as well, but I think typically in general, where I see in my role in my organization, you know, the virtual working and all of that has kind of leveled the playing field, right? Because one time you'd be on a call maybe from Ireland, and you know, most of the people on the call are sitting in a room in New York, or you know, and that's a certain disadvantage when you're trying to you know, when you're trying to contribute, right? It's not really a level playing field. I think another difference that I've, you know, seen, like things like, you know, basic rights around family leave, maternity leave, you know, even vacation time, right? Very different in the US than in Ireland. You know, very short. I think it's maybe 6 or 8 weeks maternity leave now. When I was in the US, there was 4 weeks maternity leave, right? That to me, you know, is a very difficult situation for, you know, for young mothers, and then that kind of causes a lot of, you know, stress and pain and pressure, right? When somebody, you know, based in the US is out on maternity leave, they're out for, you know, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and then they're in and they're trying to contribute, you know, 100% effectively to their role, right? And obviously they have, you know, family, small family or whatever at home. So to me, that's really critical. And you know, Ireland has moved on, you know, in those basic rights. We've a lot more to do, obviously, but has moved on a lot. I think we're ahead of the game there in the US, and that, you know, that's definitely, I think, helping, you know, women in the workplace, younger women earlier in their careers. I think also in Ireland, you know, we're definitely far more aware of, you know, people as individuals and, you know, what their needs are, right? Which is really important. I think, you know, greater levels of empathy, you know, and there's greater flexibility, I think, you know, in general, right? And I suppose then what we have to do, like, you know, if there are, you know, folks on this call today, you know, you may end up working for, you know, a global corporation, multinational company, etc. You know, it's kind of, again, it's up to us to, you know, use our advantage of maybe being Irish, right? To really, you know, help to drive things like, you know, greater flexibility, you know, and understanding, and maybe being more aware of, you know, cultural differences, you know, in terms of, you know, where people are from, right? Where people are from internationally, I mean, country-wise, I mean. So really being sensitive, I think, to culture as well. And I feel that, you know, we are more sensitive here because I suppose of, you know, hundreds of years of history and all of that. Finally, maybe just kind of small thing, but I think important as well from a, you know, a day to day doing your job, right? You know, things like expecting, you know, email responses. You know, we all, you know, it's a global. You know, global company. I work in a global company, right? You send emails, you know, you shouldn't be expecting, you know, responses straight away, right? Responses at the weekend, etc. So being aware of time zones, etc. So I think there's a bit more empathy, you know, OUS, right, than maybe in the US. Getting better, I would say, but maybe more to do.
Thank you, Anne. Now I'm going to ask the similar question to Rebecca. So throughout your career, you've spent time in both Ireland and the Middle East. So what do you think the biggest differences are in terms of embracing equity in these two areas?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. And maybe to echo a bit from Anne as well, like actually being Irish in these situations is so powerful. Like, I think we stand out as a nation in other countries. Our pragmatism and our acceptance of others, we're definitely not there, and there's work to do. But in general, I think people really see us as front runners in a lot of these fields. So it's actually really special and a special opportunity for people if you can go and work abroad to really get the sense of that and to represent our country over there. I think the best way of explaining this maybe is to just give a little bit of an insight into a day in the life I would have had when I was working in Saudi. And to set the scene, I was working in a utilities company in Riyadh, and they had asked me to come in and help them with their organization design for their IT department. And I was one of the only people in the Middle East working for Accenture at the time that had that skill set. But at first call, they actually were like, absolutely not. She's a woman, it ain't happening. So but we went back and we're like, look, she's the only person with the skill set we have. So if you want to do the work, you got to take her. So off I went, and, you know, first and foremost, dressed head to toe, abaya, burqa, which in some ways are so beautiful, by the way. And I have a huge respect for women that wear them all day. But as a very loud, blonde haired, usually wearing quite bright clothing woman, wearing all black and being completely covered was a very, very unusual concept for me and was difficult to get used to. The second thing was I was nearly always the only woman in the building. And the only way I wasn't the only woman in the building was when I brought someone with me to have a conversation or to share insights. To the point that they actually allocated me a room space in the building and put a massive sticker that was bright pink with an outline of a woman saying, you know, beware woman inside. And I was like, it was a warning to all the men in the building not to come near me, like fully segregated me off from everybody else. The other part of it was, even when I left the workplace, I was not allowed to go to the gym because the gym hours were allocated male and female, and it was only females allowed to work during the day or go to the gym during the day, which obviously wasn't applicable to me because I was working. And I also wasn't allowed to go for dinner on my own. I had to be accompanied by male colleagues. So it wasn't allowed to leave the hotel to kind of go and explore or anything like that. And the other thing was, you know, at that time, the women that I was rarely speaking to were not driving. They weren't allowed to drive. And they either had to be picked up by their driver or by a family member. And their whole day was dictated by schedule because, of course, like if you're going to have someone coordinating that for you and having to pick you up, like you have to be structured. So that freedom was kind of totally removed. So when you pause and think about all that, and I suppose, by the way, when I'm in the moment and I'm living all this, it did not feel that stark. But I think when I came out of it and when I came home to Ireland, I went, oh my God, Christ, actually what I've been through is quite, you know, impactful and very different to how we do business in Ireland. But the caveat there is, I think over the last couple of years, I've actually reflected on maybe in some ways we're not quite as different as we think. Like a lot of my time that I dedicated to mentorship when I was in the Middle East, I spoke a lot to women about how I was really trying to make flexibility or, you know, reduced hours, things like that work for them when they got married or when they had children. And I'm still having those conversations in Ireland. I have, you know, a large team of females working with me, and on a daily basis, I feel like one of them is coming to me saying, I don't think I can do this. Like, I can't juggle all these things. There's so much going on in work, so much going on at home. I'm a carer, I'm a mother, I'm a wife. I'm also trying to be a brilliant person in my career, and I just can't do it. So trying to encourage people to stay is and to continue their career and to be selfish, which I think it was Kate mentioned, like, is so hard. And I was having that conversation in the Middle East as well. So that's not quite that different. And the second one was, I was going to comment on the pace of change is also interesting, because I think they're so low on the scale of diversity and gender equality that they realize they have a much harder and bigger lump to get over. And so they're moving at a much faster pace. I mean, even since I left, there has been massive changes. And they have, I suppose, a government model that allows them to make these changes very quickly. Whereas in Ireland, we are much further along our journey and we're in a much better place. But actually, our pace of change feels a little stagnant. And, you know, it's not changing as radically. And we're getting there, but it seems slow. And sometimes I think that's policies and principles in place that are not allowing us to maybe make the radical changes that other countries are looking at. So I suppose to answer the question, massive differences in many ways. But actually, I think when you pause and you think about it, maybe there's not so many. And we actually, you know, we can be an example to other nations. And back to my original very beginning, I said about being Irish and being proud of that. I think spreading the message of how we've gotten to where we are in the journey that we're on to other countries is so important. But also we have similarities, and I think we need to recognize that we have issues as well ourselves. And actually we need to move it maybe a little bit more aggressively if we want to get to where we think we need to be.
Thanks, Rebecca, for such an interesting answer. For our last few questions, we'd like to open them up to contributions from all our panelists again. So our next question is, embracing equity for a sustainable society. What does this mean?
I mean, I'll start there. I think there's very good evidence that women in general have a much clearer idea of the survival of the planet and the necessity for sustainability and being environmentally friendly. And everything from the smallest actions in terms of, you know, recycling through to the bigger pictures of designing communities that are safe for other forms of transport in terms of cars. But I think women bear a disproportionate burden. And I think this is a real example of where equity is really important in business, because I think business actually bears the biggest responsibility. Because I may be there and I'm inclined to do this, being obsessive about my composting through to a plastic bottle top, and I'll put it in the recycling and make sure it's clean, and, you know, don't you mixed it up, don't put it in the right one. But in reality, the businesses I buy from and the businesses you purchase and I interact with as a consumer are really truly the people who can make a change. And I think in some fashion, we need to try and harness the role of women in those communities, you know, that unique understanding and their sense of a fear for their children's future. That's not to impugn men that they're less interested, but it is truly women who worry about the future and how their children will manage. The fact that life expectancy is getting worse, you know, the fact that their children will not have a house to live in, that for the first generation, our children will be worse off. I mean, I have a 23-year-old and a 25-year-old, and it really concerns me the future they're going to have. But it's to try and integrate that into strategic business thinking, because I don't think it can be done separately, and individual action isn't going to change it. So I think that this is a move we need to make from individualism to business as regards to sustainability.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Sorry, Leah.
No problem, thanks.
Sorry, I was just going to add actually a little bit to what Mary said. So Jana Halloran actually spoke this morning at Accenture's IWD event in Dublin, and he actually mentioned the sentence. He said, if you take anything away from what I'm saying, I want you to take away that diversity begets stability. And I think he was talking about it in the context of nature, that by having all these different biodiversities in nature, that it brings stability to our planet. But I also think that applies and to follow up what Mary's saying about people. So if we bring diverse people to the table for the conversation, that's men, women, all different types of backgrounds and socioeconomic situations, then I think we absolutely can make a massive stance on the sustainability challenge. So to me, it's about bringing all of the people with the different backgrounds to the table, because then I think it becomes a very different conversation.
Thanks. So our next question is for all of the panelists again. And what is the most important piece of advice you've been given in your career?
I'll go there. Pretty simple one. I think Ciara might have heard this one before, actually, but you know, lots of great advice over the years. But the one that I really hold on to is never leave a room without giving your opinion. You won't bring much value to a discussion if you don't say anything, right? You know, and it is really important to listen. You know, and you know, take on board ideas and opinions. But if you give your opinion, make sure you give your opinion where, you know, and have the confidence to you know, to do that and to speak up is probably the most important piece of advice I've been given.
Could I just add to that, Anne? I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. And in a way, my piece of advice is similar, is to stick with and offer your opinion even when it might be contrary or difficult or new to the group if you're speaking to an established group. Yeah. Because, and it was a piece of advice I got, stick with it, keep going. In sight of setback, you might not think you're making any difference. And people would look at me now, you know, and I'm at the top of the establishment of general practice and medicine, and sort of say, well, how could you not have prospered or done well? But when you're trying to articulate for reproductive justice and the absolute, when you see the women who had to go to England for abortions and you're trying to speak into the medical establishment and being a lone voice, sometimes really hard to keep going. And I'm sure there's the equivalence in business where you're a lone voice, a naysayer. I sat on the board of the Medical Protection Society for 8 years, which was the biggest indemnity provider in the world for medical indemnity. And one of the pieces I learned there was the importance of appointing a naysayer to any significant project. And I sometimes saw myself through medicine and all the years as a naysayer. You wouldn't necessarily think that now, but it's just to hold on to your belief. Think of new strategic ways to go about it. Bide your time, but say your piece, even if you think I'm going to be the only person at the back saying something awkward, because in the end it will make a difference. And I didn't win repeal or change all that on my own. There was a huge groundswell, but we were part of the picture, and there were times when we were going to give up, and we didn't, because some very senior people in the background just said, keep going. Thanks.
The best piece of advice I was ever given was by a woman in California called Nelly Galland. She actually started a production company in America, and she's part Latino, so she speaks a lot to young Latino women in the United States about, and their culture and attitude to business and money would be quite similar to Ireland's actually. And her piece of advice that I carry with me a lot is Prince Charming isn't coming. And that's about being okay on your own. That's not about like you know, on a day like this today as well, I think we have to be very careful that we don't sort of alienate men, because some of the most amazing learnings I've had about entrepreneurship in my life have actually been from men. You know, my dad is entrepreneurial. Some of my very, very good friends are entrepreneurial. So it's not to say that Prince Charming isn't coming and to say that we don't need men and there's no roles for men, but it's also, what she's saying there is that as women, we do need to be able to stand on our own. And that's the notion of being financially independent, healthcare autonomy and body autonomy, and those messages. So that's my message I'm passing on for today. Prince Charming isn't coming.
Thanks. Would you like to add to that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking about this, and there's probably a few different things that I live by every day, but the one that I probably most relevant maybe to you guys as students and the panels and stuff is that, you know, I think a woman who actually, she was the CEO for ESB, mentioned a couple of years ago at an event I was at, that sometimes when you're at the fork in the road and all signs are leading to the right, everything is making you think, right's my right direction, going to go that way, it's the safe route. And all of a sudden there is someone saying, do you know what about going left? To say yes, because actually the windy road, the one that's kind of the maybe outlier, the one you didn't think was for you, will bring the biggest adventures and be the one that changes your life and makes you think about things. worst case scenario, you have to go back to the fork and you've got to take the right at a later point. But really, there's no harm in saying yes, taking the opportunity. And I do feel like I've lived some of that in my career, that I've taken the route less traveled, and I've said yes to opportunities that I thought I'd be a failure in, or that would be risky, but actually they are the ones I have the stories to tell, and have definitely added the most color to me as a person. So yeah, I think take the road less traveled.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. So next we're going to move on to our Q&A session. So if anyone from the audience has any questions, you can ask them, or you can use the Q&A function as well.
I might jump in, Leah, and just ask a question of our panelists. Thank you all so much for your sharing your experiences and your insights this afternoon. What would you say, maybe just in terms of, so we've talked about maybe successes, are there failures that you're happy to share with us this afternoon, that you maybe have learned from, and maybe give some insights around that? Does anyone want to? Anne, I'll ask that question of yourself.
I can go.
Yeah.
I suppose not so much a failure, but I think, maybe taking more risks, right? I think if I had my time over, I would probably have taken more risks. I've done a lot of different things, different roles within the, similar enough space, but I would have probably taken more risks with my career. A small bit like Rebecca said, and I do think about the Emily Dickinson poem, right? Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, right? But maybe taking more risks, and at the end of the day, your career hopefully is a long one, but maybe doing things, and maybe changing, maybe more quicker, right, rather than getting too comfortable in a particular area or role, I would say.
Thanks, Anne. Mary, do you have any thoughts on sharings or learnings?
Yeah, well, one is actually just musing, because Kate mentioned it earlier. It was about talking about money, and this is a personal story in the sense that here I am, at the more senior areas of my career, and from a salary point of view, I'm at least as equitable as everybody else, but I'm not for a pension. Because I didn't talk about money. I was always slightly embarrassed, slightly soft-soaped. And when somebody presented to me what looked like a good deal in a very, very nice way, I took it without really drilling in and asking the hard questions. And I just didn't think about money early enough, often enough, in the broad enough perspective, because I had inherited that thing Kate really well described. So I'm not facing an early retirement, because I'm spending my whole time catching up. And if I was to give any advice to you early on, it's to really, really, think about money. The other one that I had really important mentors, but I didn't actually appreciate the value of them as much as I should have, because I could have lent into them more. And if I was to encourage anybody from that, is to recognize a mentor when you see it. See that person, recognize a mentor when they're a possibility. And my most important mentors were men. Just to go back to that point, they were indeed Prince Charmings. They were fantastic. But I think as those of us who are leaders, it's to offer ourselves as mentors, but also for people to see the necessity of it, to see that you can't possibly know everything and you need to sometimes bounce ideas off of people. So acknowledge them, seek them out, be a little bit pushy again, state your voice, because I don't think I realized how important they were and how much they potentially protect you. And it's one of the downsides, unfortunately, of online and Zoom, is we don't have the same mentor opportunities. And particularly for women who are that bit slower going ahead, who are that bit less likely to network, who didn't as likely go to the private schools who have those built-in networks. Because now today we're missing the chat afterwards, we're missing the coffee break, we're missing waiting for the lift together, walking out the gate together. And would you mind if I asked you? But it's to try and really think actively to seek those opportunities, because they're so important. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mary. Leah, will I hand back to you there?
Yeah, so if no one else has any questions, we're going to hand over now to Jane to give her final thoughts. And thank you very much to our panelists for taking the time to speak with us today and for giving us fantastic insights into their lives and their careers. It's been a pleasure. So if you want to take over, Jane, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah and Anya. I think you have chaired an excellent, insightful, pragmatic panel today. I think what jumped out at me was you come from very different careers, different areas of expertise, but there was a lot of commonalities there. And I think it's fantastic that we're having a discussion here today, not quite in Cubs, in Zoom in Cubs, but about financial independence and the importance of it. I love that Prince Charming isn't coming. I think we should be all singing Miley Cyrus's new song, I Can Buy Myself Flowers, going out the door today. So I think that's really good. Never leave a room without giving your opinion. And I so agree, as a teacher of male and female students, I see myself, these wonderful young women who are very slow to say what, you know, to contribute to a discussion sometimes. So it's wonderful to see Anya and Leah starting this new society or proposing this new society. It's so important. And I would have been the same myself. It's not like I was, you know, hand up straight away in my BCom class back in the 90s. I wasn't either. So much good advice there. Take more risks, say your piece, all so important. And I think coming from women who have, you know, experienced a lot, suffered maybe failures, didn't take the risks that they should have, but learned along the way. So that's brilliant. Mary, what you said about mentors as well, and Kate too, so important. And I'm just going to take this opportunity before we finish up, just to mention the IMI scholarships again for our professional staff within Cubs. This is a Women in Leadership course. It's developed with the 30% Club in Ireland. And it's really that opportunity to support and improve leadership capabilities. And these courses always are a fantastic networking opportunity. Sometimes that's where you'll find your mentor as well, you know. So I think this course is a powerful mix, and myself and Ciara were delighted to be able to announce it just last week. Just to say as well about the 30% Club initiative, for the 9th consecutive year, we're launching our Exec Ed Scholarship Programme. And this is thanks to the support and generosity of higher education institutions in Ireland, that over 100 women have availed of these scholarships to pursue executive education in their chosen careers. So I can see here I've gone over, we've gone over to 2 o'clock. But before I go, first of all, just to acknowledge Professor Ciara Heaven. This event would not have happened today without her. Her ambition and her motivation and her drive is always inspiring. I really enjoyed the talk and the discussion, and I would love if there was a coffee afterwards, but unfortunately not today. So just to say thank you to all the panelists, Anya, Leah, Sinead and Ciara, and Andrew as well in terms of organising it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and happy International Women's Day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.